Moving on to transport in the city, I think I don't have to go into the Southern Rail situation. We've just heard that the I-360 boss has resigned because of the situation that she's going to move back to London. She's not the only one. There have been quite a few Brightonians now saying they're moving to London because they just can't commute anymore. This is probably one of the biggest problems the city is facing. What's happening with the council? Has the council discussed this? Are you looking for ways to try to resolve this issue as a united body, working across parties?
The simple fact, I'm the opposition transport spokesman and nobody's talked to me at all. I think everybody's trying to resolve it. I think there are a lot of entrenched attitudes here. It's obviously become a political dispute, and whenever there's a political dispute with a lot of consequences from it, then people will leverage up on both sides. So we're in an intractable situation. The government is trying to help, the local MPs are trying to help, the council are trying to help in some way. The problem with the current Labour administration is that they do have a slight tendency to go along with the unions, whereas maybe they should be a little bit more balanced and try and help the poor old residents who are trying to get up and down to London and do their job. I just feel that any situation where people are this disadvantaged, everybody should sit round and discuss it. We're at a situation where there's two entranced people. They just won't talk to each other, and they just up in the ante all the time. I would like to see the council sit people down, get them in a room and discuss it until the situation's sorted. It's just terrible for everybody.
And again, this is an issue that Brightonians are extremely frustrated about. They've raised, £27,000 or something through crowdfunding to try and fund a legal investigation into the issue. The government is refusing to cooperate on with. So what more can Brightonians do? Because I think people have been protesting. They've started a crowdfunding campaign. They've hired lawyers. There's a lot of frustration, and do you have any advice for people on what they can do to help fix the situation?
Yes, I do, and I think that politicians are always worried about votes. In the end, politicians will have to be re-elected, and I think the biggest thing that the residents of this city can do is get in touch with their local politicians, their MPs, government ministers, and put pressure on them. But as I say, as an independent resident, there's very little you can do. But if people get together and hire lawyers to press the case, then I think that's a very good idea. I think that this situation is out of hand. People in this city are being disadvantaged, and it needs sorting as quickly as possible.
And Peter Kyle recently said in an interview that he thought the government was hiding behind Southern Rail because they dictate a lot of the prices and the Department of Transport makes a lot of the profit. So he said he thought that they were in some ways using the franchise as a scapegoat for perhaps their own failures or something that people should be pointing the finger at them for a lack of concern or ability to create a really good functioning system. Do you have any comment on that?
My only comment is I know Peter Carr's under a lot of pressure here locally from his own internal party. So Peter's likely to say all sorts of things, but I think he just needs to calm down a bit. Because the more he says, it's only going to inflame the situation. Government ministers I know are trying to sort this out, and I think if the local MP tries to play to his own caucus in trying to remain the local MP, then that's just inflaming the situation. The one thing I think Peter should do is sit down with the local Labour administration, sit down with the other local parties and try and resolve this issue sensibly rather than trying to up the ante all the time and inflame everything. I think government ministers, I've heard local MPs around the rest of the area where people come into Brighton to go up to London from the surrounding areas, they are pressurising ministers. But I'm afraid the way the situation is at the moment, the ministers can't act because of the pressure that they're being put under. It's a bit of a catch-22 situation. I just wish everybody would calm down, sit around a table and discuss it.
So do you know what government ministers are doing? Because from what I've seen, they've been saying we're not going to get involved. So, but I don't know. I might not be up to the latest or know as much as you do. So do you know what they're actually taking, or if the Department for Transport is taking any steps? And they certainly haven't cooperated with the lawyers that Brightonians have hired. They've refused to reveal their contracts, so the lawyers can't even tell whether they're fully legal or not.
Yeah, I think as a local councillor in Brighton and Hove, I don't think ministers are going to share with me what they're doing behind the scenes. I think that's probably stretching politics a little bit too far. But what I do know is that we have a 30-year rule in this country where government papers are released, or 30-year, 50-year, 60-year rule, depending on the secrecy, where papers are released after a certain period of time, because quite often things are happening in the background that don't come out in the press. So I'm very confident, knowing the history of this country, that government ministers are acting to do what they can to sort this situation out. Just because they're not going public, and just because they're not talking on latest TV, or they're not talking on the BBC, doesn't mean they're not doing anything. I'm sure there's an awful lot of things going on in the background. And one of the things that stops them acting is when people put the political pressure on, because then they have two situations where one side won't talk to the other side, and that stops things happening. So I would just ask for calmness and allow ministers and the rail companies to get on with doing their job and sort the problem out.
Now, do you believe that what they want to do would be in the people's favour? Yeah, in the favour of the Brightonians, in the favour of fixing transport, making it cheaper, more efficient, better for everyone? Or is it stubbornly holding on to sort of a way of making money off of people's need for transport?
Right. I think the first thing to say is if you're trying to hint at nationalisation or taking over by the government, I don't think government is ever the solution. I think government is always the problem, not necessarily Conservative or Labour governments, just governments generally. The more they try and help, the worse things seem to get. So I was quite a fan for privatisation of the railways, but I think it needs to be refined somewhat. I don't think that it's working necessarily 100% at the moment, but certainly if the government were to take it over, can you honestly say to me that if the government takes over the railways, they're going to be better? I can always remember the British Rail statement 30 years ago, the advertising, British Rail, get in there, and they never got there. British Rail never gave us a good service. British Rail were never safe. They were never well invested. It's only from the last few years of privatisation that the investment's gone into the railways, and the railways have been a success. And partially because of the success is why we have overcrowded trains. So I don't think direct government intervention is the way, and I don't think complete privatisation is the way. I think there's a happy medium, and I think we're just not there yet.